The audience falls silent as the speaker approaches the lectern. Tall, distinguished, Dr. Ambrose is as impressive as ever. Dressed in his usual black tie and tails tuxedo, he walks across the large raised stage. He's a man of the age. It's 1885. It's the golden era of new inventions. Electric lights replacing candles, automobiles replacing horses. Railroads are crisscrossing countries, opening economic opportunities in manufacturing, allowing regular people to buy and own things once reserved for the very rich, and travel is becoming the new leisure pastime. This is truly the age of wonders. The rising tide of economic and social changes are sweeping across England, and Dr. Ambrose is riding the wave, steering Cambridge University to lead the way and supply the leaders for the bright and shiny future. His quiet confidence has been his constant companion, but as he prepares to speak to his colleagues in front rows, see for the first time uncertainty in his dark brown eyes. The lecture hall is filled with mostly men, university professors and administrators, business and government leaders, landowners, and up in the balcony city residents. A few well-connected women of note are also here. All are well appointed and intensely interested in tonight's program. Most had an encounter this week and want to learn more about what's happening to them and their city. Some fidget as the doctor starts. As you all know, this week has been unique in the history of our city, and without exaggeration, I can say unique for mankind. Never before has so many unexplained and unexplainable events ever occurred. As the president of this university, a professor in the sciences, and a citizen in good standing in this community, I stand before you as a confused person by the events of the past week, as any of you are. I would like to give you a long and detailed introduction to our speaker for tonight, as is my wont, but I'm unable to because the speaker has graced us with today's talk, but with none of her history. Even her name is an enigma. The doctor straightens himself to his full height, and in a loud voice he swings his arms to his left and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present T.X." All eyes follow his arm. His fingers point to the red velvet curtain behind him. A pause. The hall is perfectly silent. The curtain flutters, and a woman of medium height and build emerges, well dressed, but certainly not extravagantly, in a long, flowing, full-length gown of unknown fabric and design. It reaches the floor, but never touches it. The woman moves towards Dr. Ambrose, purposefully, but in no hurry. Her eyes are only on him. No one applauds, or even has a sense that they should. All eyes are on the woman. Her arm extends to the doctor. He gently takes it, leads her to the lectern. Dr. Ambrose pauses, faces the audience, none of which is looking at him, releases her hand, turns, and walks off stage. Dr. Ambrose has introduced hundreds of speakers in his long career, and when he turns to leave the stage, he's always met with a thunderous applause. Not tonight. The hall is eerily quiet as he exits. TX stands at the lectern, the first woman to ever stand there, but everyone in the great hall feels as if she belongs there, and more importantly, they all long for what she has to say. She's completely at ease with the crowd. Scanning the audience, each person feels as if she's here only for them, only. There's no amplification, so the past speaker uses a loud stage voice to be heard in the back rows. In contrast to the doctor's booming voice, TX begins speaking in a normal conversational voice, but each person hears her perfectly clear.
Thank you all for coming. Before I start, I have an announcement to make. I want to state that there is no danger.
A low murmur starts as audience members turn to each other, shock on their faces, and ask, "Danger? What is she talking about?" TX, her voice, no louder than before, cuts through the buzz.
There's a man in the hall that wishes to do me bodily harm. He's bought a gun with intent to use it tonight.
Gun? Who has a gun? 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 Who has a gun? Is she kidding? A gun here? A gun here? Is she kidding? In a calm, unhurried voice, TX says,
Would the man with the gun please raise his hand so we may see where you are?
All heads swivel around the great hall looking for a raised gun. Who is it? Why would they be bringing a gun? Who is it? And why would he bring a gun? TX answers their murmured questions.
Again, there's no danger. This is the man.
She points to the man on the right side of the hall, 20 rows back, sitting in an aisle seat. The people around him shrink back as he reddens and reaches into his coat pocket. He's fumbling with something, trying to free it from his pocket. TX is not speaking, but all hear her in their head.
No danger. Be calm. No danger. Be calm.
With her finger still pointing to him, she walks around the lectern and towards the man. She says,
No one will be hurt here tonight.
And with that, the man begins to float up out of his seat. The crowd gasps as his hand comes out of his pocket with a gun. He's now hovering above the crowd, looking down, shocked and unseemingly aware of the gun in his hand. With all eyes on the gun, no one notices TX floating up and towards the gunman. 4 big men in the front row in front of the lectern jump up as if on command and scurry down the row towards the floating man with the gun. TX glances towards the men and says,
It's all right, officers. I've disarmed his weapon. There's no danger. Thank you for your concern. Please be seated.
TX states. The policemen glance at one another and somehow know she's speaking the truth and go back to their seats. Everyone gasps again when they see her approaching the gunman and stop in midair, within an arm's length away. TX, directing her attention to the man with the gun, restates in a calm, even voice her promise.
No one will be hurt tonight, including you, Lester.
Speaking to the man with the gun.
Now let's talk. Lester, you came here to shoot me. Is that correct?
The gunman, who's been looking around and wondering why he doesn't fall, turns his head up and meets TX's eyes for the first time. He is unafraid, but is concerned about the policeman.
They won't hurt you. I promise.
TX says, and he believes her. Even though he didn't answer her first question, TX asks him another.
Why do you want to hurt me, Lester?
He hesitates.
It's okay. No harm will come to you. Just speak the truth.
TX coaxes. He starts.
Yes, go on.
You're the devil, he blurts out, and everybody knows it.
Why do you think I'm the devil?
You can do things no one else can. You're the devil, he says, raising the gun, pointing it directly at the slim floating woman, more assured of himself and his purpose now. The crowd gasps, and a woman in the back shrieks. TX calms them down by spreading her hands in a palm-down moment.
No danger. Stay calm.
Is not spoken, but heard by all.
What kind of things can I do, Lester?
TX asks. Well, Lester starts, still pointing the gun at the floating woman. You make things float, like you're doing right now. You can disappear. I saw you. You did it yesterday, and... He trails off.
Lester, may I ask you a question?
Well, sure. I guess so. Lowering the gun a bit, TX leans in and asks.
Have you ever run a race?
Race? What do you mean?
You know, running a race against some other boys when you were younger.
Lester, thinking back, smiles and says, "Sure, I used to race my friends all the time. I was pretty fast too. Ask anyone." He says with a bit of pride.
I'm sure you were. Did you win?
Lester lowers the gun. It points at the floor. "Win the race? Sure. Like I said, I was fast."
Did you win all of the time?
TX asks. "All the time? Well, no. No one wins all the time. Maybe except for Mac. If he was in the race, he would always beat me."
Did you try your hardest when you ran against Mac? Or did you think, well, I can't beat him anyways, so why try?
"Not try. Are you kidding? I busted myself against him."
And still, you did not win. After you lost, did you get a gun and shoot Mac?
Lester drew back. "Of course not. He and I grew up together."
But he could do something you could not. Isn't that right?
Yes, but that's... Lester started to say. TX cut him off and asked another question.
Are you good at growing things, Lester?
"Growing things? You mean like plants and crops?"
Yes. Plants.
"No, I've never had the knack for growing things. What does that have to do with anything?"
What are you holding in your hand?
TX pointing to the gun. The officers start to rise, but she holds her palm down to them, and they again take their seats. Lester looks at his hand and is amazed that there's a gun in it. A gun. I...
It's all right. Is it loaded?
Well, yes, I loaded it earlier today."
May I see the bullets?
"Sure, I guess if you really want to."
I do.
Lester brings the revolver up, flips out the barrel where the bullets he put in earlier are. He looks down, and to his amazement, he doesn't see the shiny brass cartridges, but something dark.
Is there something wrong, Lester?
"I don't know."
Could you dump the bullets into your hand so I and everyone else may see them?
He holds the gun in one hand and puts his other hand palm up under the bullet chamber and tips the gun up. No bullets come out, but only coal black seeds.
Seeds? How can there be seeds in there? I put bullet...
TX points to the gun.
You put your anger in there. You put your ignorance in there. You put your fears in there. All those things you loaded into the gun would bring nothing but death to you and your spirit. Now you're holding the seeds of life in your hand. Not death, life, full of growth and potential. Lester, you said you were no good at growing things. Have you gone around killing all the farmers because they could do something you could not? Of course you didn't. You're a good man. Now go out and make yourself a better man. Learn something new. Be something new. And your anger and your fears will dissolve, as your bullets did.
The completely transfixed crowd watches as Lester floats back down to his seat. TX is at the lectern silently waiting as Lester puts the gun back in one pocket and the seeds in another.
Thank you again for your indulgence. It just so happens my talk tonight was going to be about fear and how it hobbles the mind. And
TX started, but man in the front row stood up, hat in his hand, and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but how did you change those bullets and get Lester to float up? And A rumble starts in the crowd, and more questions fill the air. Disappear, heal the sick? How? Who? What? How? Disappear, heal the sick? How? Who? What are you? Where did you come from? Who? What are you? Where did you come from? What are you? Where did you come from? Heal the sick? What? Who? How? TX lets the questions fly about for a while, then holds her hand up, and the hall quiets. She turns her attention to the man standing that asked the first question.
Franklin, may I ask you a question?
Franklin wasn't expecting this, or that she knew his name, shrugs his big shoulders and says,
Sure, I guess so. Thank you. You want me to explain what seems to you extraordinary, or at least out of your ordinary experience of the world. Is that correct?
Yes, something like that.
Fine. Let me ask you to explain something to me first. You grow apples, don't you?
Yes, ma'am, I do, Franklin answers, and many heads in the hall nod in agreement.
Good. Explain to me something you have seen hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. How does a tree make an apple?
Well, Franklin starts slowly. The blossom comes out in the spring.
And where did the blossom come from?
Well, it comes out of the spur.
And the spur comes from?
The spur grow on the branches.
And where do the branches come from?
TX asks. The trunk, and the trunk grows out of the roots, Franklin says, anticipating her next question.
Good. Very good. So let's summarize. The roots come together and make a trunk. They are made out of the same material and look similar. Okay, that makes sense. The trunk makes branches, the branches the spurs. They are different versions of the same thing. Don't you agree, Franklin?
He nods agreement.
Now, the spurs make the blossoms. Out of something hard and woody comes something as delicate as a butterfly wing. There are two completely different things. How do we explain that, Franklin? And when we go one step further, the butterfly wings make an apple. Oh, Franklin, you've gone too far now. This is improbable, impossible maybe even, miraculous. It's all that and more. But you don't see it that way because it's common, regular, and an everyday experience. You stand up in this hall, surrounded by your friends and co-citizens, and ask me how I can make a man float up a bit. And you have an entire grove of apples that you made out of butterfly wings. Franklin, you have real magic in your hands, and it's been my privilege to point it out to you. Please, take your seat.
He sits a bit dazed, but with a warm smile on his face. More questions arise from the audience. They want more, but TX thinks they have plenty to try and digest for one evening. With a raise of her hand, she quiets the hall.
Fear of the unknown or unfamiliar hobbles the mind and narrows the vision of what could be. Daydreaming is an important skill to foster, for it renews the world, our lives, and our souls. Thank you so much for your kind attention tonight. I know you have many questions, but talk to each other about what happened here tonight. And talk about the butterfly wings. that you have in your lives, that you turn into apples.
With that, TX turns and walks towards the velvet curtains. The hall is silent until she almost reaches the place where the curtains part. Then, thunderous applause and cheering erupts in the hall. Everyone jumps to their feet and cheers. TX stops, hand on the curtain, turns, smiles, and with a small wave steps between the curtains and is gone. Thank you for listening to TX, written by G.J. Magellan, performed by Austin Govey.